So some steps were taken, and that particular number was brought down by 30% due to contraction of imports, a slight increase in exports, some rise in remittances. But we have a way to go on this front, and I think the budget that will be coming out in a few weeks will lay out a detailed plan on how to achieve and then sustain a macroeconomically stable framework that will address this foreign exchange balance of payment gap that we have. The second area where we inherited a gap was on the fiscal side. And although this government has tried to restrain expenditures to last year's levels, revenues have not been mobilized in the magnitude that they needed to. And I think this area remains one where we need to have a futuristic approach. So the new budget again will lay out new revenue areas, new ways of formulating policies, new types of rates, and new type of incentives to begin to narrow this gap and then achieve balance in the second component of the macroeconomy. So on the exchange, the foreign trade gap, the fiscal gap. And the third area which I want to say, which has been again an area we have not somehow learned from experience, is the way the public sector corporations dominate or still continue to dominate key areas of the economy. The public sector corporations bleed about 200 billion rupees a year. Electricity sector alone contributes another 300 to 400 billion rupees a year. They have accumulated these circular debts of about 1,600 billion. And clearly, any good efforts on the macroeconomic side, on the fiscal responsibility side, and all that are subverted if we cannot have these kind of components or major components of the government not perform and continue to hemorrhage us. A note on what might be a way forward. You see, I was at one time in an earlier life, I was Minister for Investment and Privatization. And between 2003 and 2006, we were able to privatize 34 companies in electricity, in telecommunications, the big banks you see, Habib Bank, United Bank, and all that, 34 transactions in 3 years, over $5 billion. I left in 2006, early 2006. It's been 13 years. In the last 13 years, not a single company has been privatized. So we have to really get together and say, okay, if we have not done such a fantastic job of managing them through bureaucrats and government employees, then what is the way forward? And I think, again, this government is determined to come out with a game plan that begins to realize the full potential of these companies and learn from the experience of international. On the macroeconomic side, I want to acknowledge that inflation is an issue that we worry about. It's not in government's hand to control the prices of oil and other things that are internationally determined, but you know, the government takes the flak for it. So what we need to do is figure out a combination of monetary and fiscal policy to curtail aggregate demand, to reduce imports, especially of luxury items, or make them harder to import, and try and minimize the impact on the lives of ordinary people, because this hurts public and it hurts everybody. So this is inflation is a bad kind of tax, and I think one wants to adopt strategies, and the government is fully engaged with this particular in forestalling and managing this threat. At the same time, both because of the manifesto of the ruling party as well as because of its ideology, the welfare of ordinary folks, but also are citizens who are relatively vulnerable, who are relatively weak, and therefore there's going to be a greater focus on social safety nets. As we go forward, we have to find more resources to alleviate the suffering and to reach out to those who are left behind in our society. So there will be an enhancement on the BISP and a new program which integrates all the social safety nets under the umbrella of SARS program, where we have to think smartly, we have to develop modern technology to ensure that money gets in the hands of the right people, and this will be a focus, and the budget will elaborate on that. I want to make a comment on the IMF negotiations because everybody's talking about it. Well, the IMF exists as an international institution to try and deal with situations approaching an economy in not the right balance macroeconomically. So we are having negotiations with them, and obviously we have to ensure that a reasonable program gets developed so that one can create a platform for sustainable macroeconomic stability, and to ensure that we also use that to enhance further our relationship with other international players such as the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, our bilateral friends, and so on. It is a good signal to send that this government is committed to fiscal discipline, that it is committed to reasonable macroeconomic policies, and that it is committed to engagement with the rest of the world.